When I say the words Greek sculpture, the idea of perfection comes to mind. In the classical period, sculptors were downright obsessed with creating the idealized versions of humanity in the forms of sculpting their gods and goddesses. If all periods of Greek sculpture were condensed into high school stereotypes from the 80s, they were quarterbacks and cheerleaders who had it all figured out. While they're great and won state champs for a reason, they kind of lacked messiness and humanity. They just stand there for us all to gaze up into their glory, but I wanted more. Enter the rebellious teenage kids, the Hellenistic era. What was once taut was now loose and flowing, and their bodies weren't confined to the ideals of perfection. That's why I wanted to focus on Greek sculpture in the Hellenistic period, and how they conveyed movement. Two all-stars from this era are the Nike of Samothrace and Laocoon and his sons. If a masterclass was done on movement and sculpting, you would have to look at these two beasts. Let's start with the Nike of Samothrace by giving a little background before diving into the details. Andrew Stewart, the author in the journal article The Nike of Samothrace, Another View, said that the sculpture was dedicated in the sanctuary of the great gods, then going on to say, as Burkitt once bluntly concluded from the text of such dedications, their main function was to save the worshippers from the perils of the sea. With naval battles ensuing, it's very possible she commemorated a victory and was also worshipped in the hopes of safe passage overseas. According to Dr. Amanda Herring of Smart History, the sculpture has an overall composition of 18 feet but consists of two parts, Nike herself, who is 9 feet, and the ship under her. She would have originally been painted brightly, but her marble is now white due to the weathering of time. Stewart also says that she was carved from pure white Parian marble, but her ship and its base are constructed of blue-gray lithos lardios. Unfortunately, the artist of this masterpiece will be indefinitely unknown, but viewers can learn a lot about motion and fluidity from their work. She is seen stepping towards the wind, the force of which is plastering the garments on her body. Her wings, which are projectiles and unsupported, which hardly happen in Greek sculpture, are being forcibly pushed back by this imaginary wind that the viewer has no choice but to visualize in their mind. The painstakingly detailed garments are often praised by critics. Another quote from Stewart saying, "The effect of stormy movement and gale on the drapery has hardly ever been more gloriously handled." But what can we learn from this other than how insane the artist went? First off, we gotta talk about how this evolved from the classical Greek craze contrapposto. One of the earliest examples of this is the spear bearer, where someone standing has more weight on one leg than the other leg bends at the knee, creating a tilt with the hips, shoulders, and head. This combated extreme rigidity, and the ancient Greeks utilized this to create more lifelike forms. Nike is seen pushing off one leg and lunging to the next, but there is a lifelike tilt to her waist that could remind the viewer of contrapposto. The artist also utilizes the idea of light and shade to create the depth of shadows. Looking at Nike straightforward shows her wings are tilted down, which creates a natural depth, since the light of the sky wasn't going to come right below her and light her wings. For additional movement and fluidity, straight harsh lines aren't seen anywhere on the figure except for the missing head and arms, but that's not on purpose. Evidently, the Nike of Samothrace is an icon with the wind blowing dramatically onto her. She's not meek nor dainty, but a force to be reckoned with. She's theatrical, but that's the Hellenistic period at work. Laocoon and his Sons is yet another piece full of theatrics and is seriously giving the most. In a book dedicated to Hellenistic sculpture, penned by Guy Dickens, he describes the period as a time of decadence and continues by saying it is due simply to its exaggeration of certain tendencies already present in the 4th century, tendencies which accompany the inevitable development of all art gradually away from the ideal and gradually closer to the realistic imitation of nature. He nods to the fact that Hellenistic art is rebelling against their classical parents, which contain pretty pictures of perfection, and Laocoon and his Sons is a standout of the counterculture era. Dr. Amanda Herring recounts the excavation of this artwork in 1506, saying that it was a sculpture lost to time under buildings and streets waiting to be found in the Renaissance. Let's be real, that's crazy. This marble statue is 6'8" and full of incredible imagery. Mark Fullerton, the author of the book Greek Sculpture, denotates the visceral story unfolding. He says that Laocoon was a Trojan priest who rightly warned his fellow citizens to not bring the great wooden horse within the citadel walls. Determined that the Greeks should prevail, Athena dispatches her snake to ensnare the doomed prophet and his sons. The Trojans interpret the sign exactly as the goddess intended, suffering less by their own folly than from their divine treachery. With the context of that story, the viewers get a clearer vision of what's happening. Laocoon's sons flank him as the snake entraps them all, and the son to the viewer's left is possibly already perished as he has gone limp, while the right tries to fight off the snake. Laocoon's face contorts as he screams in agony, wrinkles defining the worry in his brow. Each figure is in a state of disarray as a serpent intertwines and strikes. strikes, a detail even more vicious when scholars revealed that the sculpture was most likely painted with blood trailing from the bites and the envious green of the snake. The muscles in Laocoon's arms are notably flexed as he fights off the snake, but each male has a dramatically sculpted muscular body. These details are crucial in the effect of perceived motion that the artist or artists strove for. The motion encapsulated works in due part with the Hellenistic nature of the statue, and it being considered Baroque. Isabella Mayer, with Art in Context, examines the Baroque style in the piece by pointing out the contorted body positions and extensively dramatic emotions on the faces. Also, taking conflicts from reliefs off the walls into 3D statues with multiple figures was a Hellenistic invention and contributed to the momentum and motion of the piece. The style and agony given to Laocoon directly affects how the motion is perceived from the viewer's perspective, his head tilted to the side in a very natural way. The aching body positioning, paired with his sheer scale and rippling muscles, create a scene in motion. The sculptor uses chiaroscuro, the contrast of light and dark areas within art, to create depth and details in Laocoon's face and locks of hair to cultivate the drama needed of the marble work. It's almost as if you can see him move his face to clench as he screams, as if it's a moment trapped in marble which he constantly relives. These artworks stand out for their sense of motion created from blocks of marble, orchestrating cords of muscle under skin, or the illusion of flowing fabric with a solid material could be considered witchcraft. Exaggerated realism in the Hellenistic era of Greek sculpture gifted us with these masterful pieces that would be a shame to ignore. The details like the illusion of movement from an unmoving object will always be fascinating. But maybe, just maybe, if you look close enough, the statue might just look back at you. Thank you for watching.